How's it going? Today I'm going to play Pidgeot Control with a Sylveon EX that was pretty heavily inspired from Emma Hagen's top 64 Stuttgart list. First, I'm going to go over the deck list a little bit, then we're going to get into a couple of games, then I'm going to talk about if Sylveon or a deck like this has any real spot in the meta. First of all, this is quite a bit different than a lot of Pidgeot controls because it's really like less of a control deck and more of a counter box kind of deck. We have like the Pidgeot, and that's really the main controlling part is like the Pidgeot and the Giacomo and the Pennies, but there are no Eevees or Misfortune Sisters or anything like that because we're not really trying to stall out the games. We're trying to find the right attacker for the matchup and then use it. And the main way that we can do that with this deck is with the Sparkling Crystal tool that if it's attached to a Terra Pokemon, the attacks of that Pokemon cost 1 energy less of any type. So we have a bunch of different attacking Terra Pokemon. We have the Farigiraf EX that has the ability it can't be damaged by basic EX Pokemon, and its attack for Psychic Double Colorless does 160 and 30 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So with that, we can use it for just a double turbo if we have the Sparkling Crystal tool attached to it. We have Sylveon EX that for Psychic Double Colorless does 160 and the defending Pokemon's attacks do 100 less damage next turn. Now this isn't as good of an attack as like Gudra's attack because it puts the effect on our opponent's active Pokemon and not on ourselves. So our opponent can use a switch or just retreat out of it to do their regular damage. But it's mostly here for the Angelite attack that for Water, Lightning, and Psychic lets us just shuffle 2 of our opponent's bench Pokemon back into their deck. We can power this up in one turn with the Crystal and Crispin and then a hand attachment, and it's really good against decks like Lugia. We can just shuffle their Archeops back in, and after we KO their active, we're in a pretty good spot. So it's going to be a lot harder for them to build up attacking threats after that. We also have the Water Ogerpon, which can be nice for the Sob attack that says 20 and our opponent can't retreat next turn. So with a double turbo making it do 0, we can lock something in the active forever. But we can also, for just a double colorless and the tool, do the second attack that does 100 to our opponent's active. We shuffle the energy back in and it does 120 to one of our opponent's bench Pokemon. So this can let us just like lock evolving decks out of their basic Pokemon since a lot of them aren't playing Manaphy now. We have Cornerstone Ogerpon with the ability it can't be damaged by Pokemon with abilities, and then for fighting double colorless it does 140 and it's like a shred effect. The damage isn't affected by any effects on our opponent's active Pokemon. We also have Bloodmoon Ursaluna, can be really good at the end of the game just to, you know, take prizes real quick or KO a big threat that our opponent has built up. I added Mimikyu in this deck. It wasn't originally playing Mimikyu at all, but you can't really beat Iron Thorns without it, and it can help in a lot of matchups like Raging Bolt Miraidon, things like that. Mimikyu, of course, can't be damaged by EXs or Vs, and then for Psychic Colorless, we do 7 damage counters to our opponent's active. So with the Counter Gain, we can do this for just a Psychic energy. There is no missed energy in this deck, so Mew EX can just copy the Mimikyu's attack and knock it out because it's damage counters and not damage, but that should be fine because then we can just knock out the Mew EX with whatever other Pokemon we have. The way that we're going to set up our Pidgeot is Arven, Rotom, Forest Seal Stone. We also have a couple Pennies and a couple Pal Pads to heal whatever Pokemon, like our Ogerpons, reset our Blood Moon, get our Rotom off of the board. We have 1 Giacomo in here. I don't know, this could be a Temple of Sinnoh. It's mainly for Lugia. If they put a mist energy on both of their Archeops, we cannot shuffle it back in. So I figured Giacomo also covers like Cloth decks and Terapagos decks. The main argument for Sinnoh is that we could do the whole combo in one turn, like bench the Eevee, Crispin, and use the attack all in one turn. But then if we put Sinnoh in play, we don't have a way to remove it, and that can just kind of mess up our double turbo energies and stuff like that. So I just did Giacomo. I think it covers more things and can definitely be useful. Other than that, the only other kind of important cards, Lost City, is to get rid of like Slitherwings and Raging Bolt decks so they can't knock out our Mimikyus, things like that. Everything else is pretty straightforward, and that is the list. Let's get into the games. Alright, this first game we are up against a Uxie Azelf, I think it is, Frostlass spread deck. They play a Dust Ball, which is kind of interesting. That is probably the only downside to the changes that they've made to the way that the ranked ladder works is right at the beginning of it, everyone's in Pokeball. And I just like, I don't know, a lot of people grind up to Arceus pretty quick. I can't sit there and play like 100 games in one day, or I think it's like 50 you have to play to get all the way to Arceus. So for quite a bit, like a full day probably, I was just against really kind of random decks, just people playing more fun stuff, which was kind of cool, but then playing like a control deck against them felt kind of bad. But yeah, so we're up against this deck. This is also a deck I've been trying to make work myself. I haven't had very much luck with it. This It's funny, this exact deck that my opponent is playing is almost the same exact idea that I had for Uxie, which is kind of funny. I guess I'm not very original. That's kind of the most obvious idea, I suppose. But I think that we're pretty advantaged in this matchup just because I can penny up the Lumineon and the Rotom at some point. And even if I don't, I kind of want them to take a couple prizes because they are also most likely dependent on counter gain. I'm assuming that that's how they're building up their the Azelf, I think it is, that does a bunch of damage for all the damage counters on the board is with Psychic and counter gain. So I don't really want to go ahead on prizes, but my kind of thought is to just set up my Pidgeot by a turn and then use Sylveon's second attack to shuffle in all the Frostlass, because I think that that really is the main threat in this matchup is like the Frostlass is just building up too much damage, and then the Azelf coming up and one-shotting whatever I put in the active. I also kind of make the mistake of not really understanding what Sylveon's attack does in this matchup. Like, I know that it puts the effect on the active Pokemon. I knew that before this game, but for some reason as I'm playing the game, I just kind of tell myself that it puts the effect on Sylveon and that it's going to make it so that the Azelf does barely any damage. I'm pretty sure it's Azelf. It's Uxie, Azelf, and Mesprit. And yeah, I think the Azelf has the good attack. So yeah, I kind of messed that up a little bit, but last turn I basically just built my hand up to make it so that I could do this play this turn. And here I'm just trying to figure out the right sequencing, making sure that I have all of the cards or have access to all the cards to make the attack happen. And I do, as long as I have energies in the deck, and I do, so now I can Ultra Ball away. I do Defiance Band and Fezandipiti. I don't really think that Fezandipiti is going to be super useful in this matchup, and neither will Defiance Band. I'm one-shotting everything in their deck. The only thing that could be a problem is if they have a Bloodmoon. That could definitely be a little problematic, but we'll figure that out when we get there. At this point, I'm not even sure that the Defiance Band needs to be in the deck anymore, because I took out the Radiant Charizard that was originally in it, and that's what the Defiance Band goes with, is Radzard Defiance Band to knock out V-Stars. But since that isn't in here, I figured I can attack with the Girafarig for 1 energy and like spread a little bit of damage, and then attack for 270 with Bloodmoon and knock it out, which, I don't know, might be a little too much of a wombo combo, so it probably shouldn't even be in the deck anymore. But after playing like quite a few games, this is what I ended up with. I didn't really feel like I wanted too much more. Like a Buddy Poffin would have been nice, so maybe the Defiance Band could be a Poffin. They do get the TM Devo, which pretty much sucks. Now I have no Pidgeot, and that is one of the more important pieces of the deck. So I Pal Pad back in a Penny and an Arven to try and like hopefully start top decking supporters. And Penny's going to be super important in this matchup, so I can't just not put Pennies back in. We do end up getting Arven out of the prizes anyway, which is kind of nice. And I knock out their last Frostlass, so I'm going to get a little bit of break on the damage for a little bit. Like now they'd have 2 Frostlass in play, but they don't. And I can just shuffle that other one right back in. I can also shuffle back in the Azelf, I think is what I end up doing. Or I could do the Snorunt. I don't know, definitely the Frostlass. And probably the Azelf is gonna like make their deck more filled with random jank. It does give them access to another skateboard, which I wasn't crazy about, but I figure it gives them like way less top decks into good cards, so putting those 3 basically dead cards back in the deck seemed pretty good. And also I might have like just completely overthought this matchup, and I like go back and forth using the opposite attacks every other turn. And as you can see, my turns are taking way too long. I'm super overthinking it. I probably could have just attacked 6 times. Like attacked a few times with the Sylveon, they knock it out, and then attack with the Bloodmoon a couple times. And I more than likely would have been fine. But this whole game, I'm like trying to build my board up to get into this like water Ogerpon play, and then I realized like I need to also retreat off the water energy and super out it back in and get Crispin. I don't know, it's kind of ridiculous. Sometimes that is something that I do way too often, is just overthink things beyond belief and just end up making way worse plays than like something super simple like just attacking every turn and taking knockouts would have definitely been the way to go. Now they do knock out my Rotom, which is fine. I kind of plan on that happening. Not super worried about that. I don't want to let them, or I don't, want to give them access to counter cards for the whole game. Like I let them have counter catcher for a couple turns, but now next turn they won't be able to attack with the Azelf, which is kind of nice. Shuffle back in the Frostlass and their other attacker again. Kind of thinking like if I keep doing this back and forth, then hopefully they'll miss a turn of attacks. Like with this Uxie spreading all the damage. And yeah, they do get down the Azelf though. And like I said, throughout the game, I thought that I was going to lower their damage by 100. So that's how I was basing all my math for it. But this turn doesn't really matter. They don't have enough damage on the board to knock out my Sylveon anyway, I'm pretty sure. So it's going to be fine overall. And yeah, just attack. I probably could have Ultra Balled away Thornton and the Cornerstone Ogerpon. I wasn't too sure what I was going to want in the future though, so I didn't do that. I probably should have though, just to thin my deck a little bit, because I am also worried about another TM Devo. I imagine a deck like this probably plays like 2 TM Devo, unless they're not expecting a very evolution heavy format. So yeah, I am a little bit worried about that. I Eerie basically to see what's in their hand and just end up... See, I used the second attack again, which I don't think I really needed to do there. It does keep them from getting damage in play for another turn, but... Oh, and they can't attack me with the Azelf attack anyway, so I guess that was kind of fine. And I knew they had the Irida in hand, so they were probably evolving to... They could have evolved to 2 Frostlass, I think, if they just grabbed Frostlass and Stretcher. So maybe that was correct. Now I top deck the Ogerpon. They do have Manaphy in play at this point, so that doesn't very much matter. I was just looking to see what they put back in their hand with the Rescue Stretcher, and it was a Psychic Energy. So I just knock out their Uxie here, hoping that they won't be able to KO me next turn. I don't think they have enough damage in play. If they do, it's like pretty close, but I might be able to get into the water energy. Actually, that doesn't matter because they have Manaphy in play. And they're going to knock out their own Manaphy. So what I should do here is just take the knockout onto the active with the Sylveon. Hopefully that is what I end up doing. I grab the Stretcher because I did have the option to shuffle the Manaphy back in so I could grab water energy if I just retreat my Sylveon, but of course they have Artisan to get it back out, so I basically wasted my quick search for that turn. And yeah, it doesn't much matter anyway because they're going to attack and I'm going to knock him out. But I don't know, this was the only game that I used the Sylveon, so I wanted to show this game. It's kind of cool how you can just shuffle Pokemon back in every turn. My opponent gives me a thumbs up or whatever, and I end up winning the game. Most of my other games basically just looked like this. They were against kind of weird decks and very quick and boring. Like my opponent can never damage me here, so that's why I had to use that last game. This game we are up against Gardevoir. This is kind of how a lot of my first games went, where I just discovered that Water Ogerpon with the tool is a really insane combo at this point in the format, where there was like a good amount of evolution decks. They weren't playing Manaphy, and just almost guaranteed turn 2 knockout 2 evolving basics is pretty solid. Now I should not have used the Arven there. I should have just recognized that this is Guardy. They attach a Psychic to the active. They're not knocking out my Pidgey. I should have held the Arven in the forest to be able to grab Rare Candy and forest for Pidgeot and then start doing whatever I wanted. But I Arven for another Pidgey. That is like a really bad habit I have with this deck. I don't really recognize sometimes when I'm able to just get away with having one Pidgey in play and then I go out of my way to put another one into play. It's not really the best way to go about things, and I shouldn't have done that. I did bench the Rotom on purpose because in case they Iono'd me, I wanted to have Rotom in play to be able to grab a Forest Steel Stone with Arven if I drew into it. So yeah, luckily though, I do top deck the boss, so I can boss one of the Ralts and draw my Rotom. They did Ultra Ball away a Lost Vacuum there, which I don't know, everything told me that I should just attach the forest. Guardy doesn't play Lost Vacuum, but luckily I didn't, because people on the ladder are always playing just every single tech guard possible in their deck. So I am pretty happy that didn't happen, and they're forced to retreat into the Klefki to just attack again because they didn't have enough energy in play. So yeah, they just might as well do 10 damage because they want that in the active to retreat into probably the Screamtail next turn to start doing real damage. But I am able to get my Pidgeot out now. I have to evolve the damage one, which kind of sucks. I would rather evolve the bench one with no damage on it, but I want to retreat into Ogerpon this turn and start sniping their bench. They're not drawing too well, so I'm going to snipe the Ralts instead of the Screamtail. They will be able to take a prize on my Pidgey next turn, and I guess if they get super lucky, they could knock out my Rotom, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm fine with them hitting into my Pidgey, and then next turn I can knock out this Screamtail and set up the Guardy EX to be knocked out by like a Bloodmoon later in the game, and that is almost all my prizes. I just have to find another singular prize along the way, which shouldn't be too bad. I top deck Lost City. That's kind of cool. I can Lost City their Screamtail. Screamtail can be pretty annoying in these matchups, so yeah. I should probably just grab Fezandipiti. Oh no, I have to grab the double turbo. Wow, I almost like made that same mistake again, because when I was playing the game, as you could see, I was like, oh, I'll grab Fezandipiti because I'm probably going to get Iono low because this is Guardy. And then remember that he shuffles the double turbo back in, so I definitely need to grab that. I'm really hoping here that they don't get down a Monkey Dory and knock out my Ogerpon, but seeing them counter catch my Rotom, I know that's not going to happen. They put me into a pretty bad hand, but luckily Pidgeot is just broken as ever, so I can grab whatever card I want in my deck. One thing I noticed, they would have been able to knock out my my Ogerpon too. Definitely happy that they didn't do that. And I think, yeah, this turn I should be able to knock out their Guardy with my Bloodmoon. I can just, right, I can Ultra Ball for Bloodmoon and Pidgeot for the double turbo and retreat and knock them out. And then all they can do is attack with Monkey Dory and confuse me. So I'm pretty sure that we're going to end up winning this game at this point. The only question is, what do I Ultra Ball away? Is it the Lumineon or the Switch? And I do end up holding on to the Lumineon. I have Penny in deck. I can also Ultra Ball for the Lumineon if I need to. So I think the Lumineon just leaves me more outs to win the game, where the Switch, like if they somehow knock out my Pidgeot, I don't know. I think I'm just happier to have the Lumineon in the deck. And it looks like they are just going to do the Confuse play. They probably assume that I have a Penny in the deck, I would imagine. But yeah, they attach the Bravery Charm. They're probably looking at their hand and now their deck, trying to see, do I have anything I can do to win this game? And I guess their only out that they're thinking is to hope that my only Penny is my last prize, maybe. Which is fair enough. Sometimes you gotta play to your outs. They charm their Ralts so that it can't be knocked out by the Ogerpon snipe, and confuse my Bloodmoon. Which, fair enough, that is their only out to win the game, but I do just have Penny, so I can just Penny up my Bloodmoon and retreat into it and knock out this Monkey Dory and win the game. A lot of my games went like that, where I got the turn 2 Ogerpon, knocked out both my opponent's evolving basics, and they just conceded, but that person decided to play it out. They did have a line to win. I think it was kind of a hard line to see, where the only way that they were going to win that game is if they counter catchered my Pidgeot instead of my Rotom that turn, and they had to hit a way to knock out the Pidgeot with Drifloon off of the Iono. Pretty low odds that they hit that, but I don't think that they win the game any other way, and that can definitely be a hard thing to see, where it's like a really low odds play, but you just have to go for it, because if you hit it, you probably win, and if you don't hit it but still knock out the Rotom, you still lose anyway, so it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But yeah, I thought that deck was pretty cool. Seeing Emma play it on stream definitely made me want to try it out. I started with her list, ended up with this list. It took me a few games to realize, like, I had Eerie and stuff in here at first, but it took me a little bit to realize this isn't really a classic like controlling deck. This is more of a counterbox deck. We're looking to attack and take all 6 prizes rather than lock something in the active survive or run our opponent out of resources. So it is kind of a really cool deck, and I would definitely try it out. I think that there is definitely something there now that Counter Gain's a card. We have Counter Gain and Sparkling Crystal, a lot of good Terra Pokemon, so there's more than likely something there with the counter box style of deck. Does it involve Sylveon? I don't know. I think it probably depends on if there's another way to beat Lugia without it, and if Lugia is that popular. Like, Lugia hasn't been very popular, so it's not really super important, and there might just be a better way that doesn't involve a stage 1 line and also having to accelerate energy with Crispin and like a 5-card combo. I assume that it's also was in the deck for other things. Like, I don't think the Cornerstone Ogerpon was in her original list, so the Sylveon was probably also really good against Charizard. You could shuffle like their Pidgeot and their Charizard back in their deck, like counter catcher up, you know, their Rotom or whatever, and just shuffle their attackers back in and then just start attacking with Bloodmoon or something like that. Definitely pretty cool. Try it out. There's definitely something with this style of deck. I'm just not very sure if it involves Sylveon or not. My gut is telling me no, that's too much of a combo, and it is quite a bit of space in the deck, but I've been wanting to play a deck with Sylveon since it came out, so I definitely had to try it. So yeah, like or dislike, comment, subscribe, take care, and have a good one.